All right, hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're joined by the one and the only Naked Pastor for what is this, your fourth visit, fifth visit, five and a half visits?
Maybe, yeah.
Something like
Yeah.
that. I don't know, three, four, five, whatever it is.
660 shows.
That's right. Well, welcome back, David. It's always good to connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Thank
Good to
you. So
connect.
yeah, so first things first, you have a new book out, right? Flip It Like
Yeah,
This. Yeah, it's a
that's
collection of some of
right. Something
your
like this. Yeah.
collection of some of your cartoons. So maybe take some time to tell us about it. Why this book?
Yeah.
Of all of your cartoons, the
Yeah.
millions of them, why these cartoons?
Yeah. No, I've got thousands of cartoons in my arsenal, but Broadleaf Books asked if we could do a best of.
Mhm,
And so I had to go through all of those cartoons and come up with about 125 of the best cartoons. So
mhm.
that was an agreement between me, the publisher, and the most popular, the ones that got the most traffic and so on my social media. And then they wanted about 15 never before seen. So
Mm.
that's what the book is made up of. Flip It Like This are all my cartoons about spiritual abuse, feminism, silliness that happens in the name of God and Christianity and the church. And yeah, so it was a lot of fun, and it just came out, and people are loving it. People are loving it because they can buy it and they can accidentally leave it at their parents or send it to their pastor anonymously, or
Right.
leave it in their bathroom or in the room or on their coffee table. And people are sending me messages of incredible stories. I'm hearing people like picking it up off their coffee table and looking through it, and then looking at them and looking at the book and looking at them. So it's pretty cool. And
That's awesome.
it's I like it. It's under $20 and it's
Mhm.
great for presents, and for yourself as well. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now the 15 never before seen, did you draw like fresh originals for that, or did
Yeah,
you
yeah.
crack open the vault and pull some out that nobody's ever seen before, or how did that work?
No, no, they're brand new, brand
Okay.
new. I drew them. Yeah, I just drew them for the book. So and so if you want to see those 15 never before seen, you got to get the book.
Gotta get the book.
Yeah,
Only way to find it.
gotta get the book.
And it's like
Gotta
a
get the
coffee
book.
it's like a coffee table book, right? I mean, it's a nice hardback.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
hardcover. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
nice little same size as the one you held up there. About I think it's 7 by 7 inches
Yeah.
and about an inch thick, and it's a hardcover. And it's just there's my introduction is it's a few pages, but the rest of the book is just pictures. So
Mhm. That's
there's no it's just cartoons. There's no running text or anything. So people are loving it too, because they can get through it so quickly and get a good laugh and a good cry, or get good and angry, or
right.
whatever. So
Either way.
it's a good mix. Yeah,
Whatever
it's a
whatever
good mixture of
emotion.
funny, sad, angry. Yeah,
That's right. Whatever
yeah.
emotion it evokes. So you and I are going to talk about two things today. Number one, a little bit about virtual community, and then number two,
Mm,
the big thing, a bit about the social media black hole known as the comment section, that place on Facebook and everywhere
yeah.
else that attracts all sorts of people. Not just the people that adore your work and think you can walk on water, but also the people who hate the ground you walk on, as well as people who are hurting for various reasons who might come across all of our
Yeah.
pages. But I want to talk to you about these things because a lot of our listeners are trying to find companions for their deconstruction journey, virtual or in the
Mhm.
flesh, whatever, as well as kind of figure out, what are the best ways to navigate the comment sections amidst their own faith evolutions, because we don't all have like a ton of followers like you do, but even for those of us who have 100 or 1,000 or whatever, it could be tricky, right, to navigate those things, especially when family or old church friends kind of begin to chime in with the new friend and the deconstructing friends, and conversations happen about evolving ideas, and it could just be really really messy. And so I was thinking a good place for us to
Mhm.
begin would be, maybe you could talk to us about the comment sections on your social media platforms and a little bit about how they have evolved and
Mhm.
changed over the years. Because when I'm scrolling through them, which I do a lot, I don't know, but you do a really good job at creating an environment that feels safe and genuine for people to be open and honest and discuss
Mhm.
things. But even when I come across that random hater who just seems to drop in to be mean, it doesn't seem to ruin the vibe that's going on your pages like it does on other people's
Yeah.
pages. So I'm just curious if you could talk to us a bit about how that has grown and
Mhm.
evolved over the course of Naked Pastor's existence.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I left the ministry in 2010, one of the immediate presenting symptoms of leaving was the sudden loneliness that I
Mhm,
felt. So I felt incredibly isolated because I not only left the ministry, I left the church because of circumstances,
mhm,
that church anyway. And we no longer have the friends and fellowship and everything that we used to have. And after a couple of years, I thought, I'm going to start something online because I couldn't really do anything locally. I live in a fairly small city. I was fairly infamous here. And so I was pretty limited in what I could do. So I
mhm,
started an online community called The Lasting Supper and, started learning, while I was building it, how
mhm,
to do online community. And I've taken some of the things I've learned there, or I've taken the things I've learned there and applied them to my other social media, especially Instagram. My Instagram account, Naked Pastor, I moderate very closely. And it's the same with TikTok and with Facebook and Twitter. I moderate them pretty closely. In fact, I'm so busy now that I have a little bit of a team who helps me
mhm.
and alerts me to if there's a spark or a fire or smoke.
Right.
You know?
It's to come with the
And
host, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's general rules that I apply that work. I mean, if you want online community, it doesn't just happen. You have to nurture it. You have to care
Mhm,
for it. You have to build it. You have to create it, and you have to sustain it. It's one thing to build a house. It's another thing to maintain the house, as we all know if we live in one. Um, that it's the same with community. It's effort to build it, and then it's effort to maintain it and keep it,
mhm,
strong and healthy. So the things that I learned from the Lasting Supper, I excuse me, I applied to those other social media platforms and try to give them the same kind of a feel that
mhm.
that's some kind of a community that feels fairly safe
Sure.
and where people can be authentically themselves.
Mm.
But it's work for sure.
Yeah. So what are some of those specific things that you've learned? Like you talked about how, when you created the Lasting Supper, it was kind of like learning on the fly, trying
Mhm.
to figure out how to make this work and different things you've learned
Yeah.
there that you've applied to your pages. So like what are maybe your top two or three things that you've learned from the Lasting Supper that might even be helpful for our listeners who are trying to figure out how to
Hmm.
make their own pages have a sense of community to them?
Yeah. Well, one of the big things that I learned was that religion and Christianity and the church doesn't necessarily train you very well in community building. Um, a lot of people don't experience authentic community in the church.
Hmm.
I did now and then.
Hmm.
And I knew that the reason it worked was because of certain things.
Mm,
But one of the things I had to get over was that to be humble and accepting and inclusive and everything doesn't mean that you are a dead horse to be kicked or a rug to be walked over
mm,
or somebody to be abused or whatever. So I had a lot of re-educating to do you know um, that I could establish boundaries and establish rules and values to keep a community safe.
Hmm.
And that was not only helpful, but necessary and healthy. And that I didn't have to um, allow the bullies to control the space.
Mm.
And that's what will happen if you think, well, I have to be nice, I have to turn the other cheek, I have to walk the extra mile, I have to carry the extra, weight or whatever, and I can't be mean to anybody, or I can't block anybody or
Hmm.
whatever, then you're going to get in trouble, because the bullies always, if they're allowed, will dominate the space. They
Yeah.
will. They'll
Yeah.
just dominate the space
Yeah.
because they're the loudest
Hmm.
and the strongest, and they'll take advantage of what they um, discern to be weakness, or what they interpret to be weakness. If you're humble and loving and inclusive and accepting and compassionate, they'll see that as weakness and take advantage of it.
Mm.
And so I learned that quickly.
Mm.
So when I see that starting, I I immediately remind people of the boundaries.
Mm.
And if they're violated again, then um, you know, they're out.
Mm.
I speak to them or whatever and indicate to them what's happening. And if they still refuse, then they're out. It's like it's a basic rule. Everybody's
Mhm.
welcome except those who don't welcome everybody.
That's right.
It's if you're not, you can be inclusive, but if you include somebody who's non-inclusive, it's going to be a divisive place. It's
That's
not
right.
going to it's not going to be safe.
That's right.
So that's just one of the basic rules of community.
Mm.
Everybody's welcome except those who don't welcome everybody. So
Yeah.
let's take, for example, a gay person
Hmm.
comes to the group, and they've heard that the place is very safe, but somebody in the group is anti-gay,
Hmm.
and starts, well, what about the scripture? Blah 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 blah. Immediately, the place doesn't feel safe, and you're like, oh, I can't really, we're an open space. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has you, but they won't shut up. They won't
Hmm.
stop. Bullies just don't stop until you say, hey, we're inclusive here. We're affirming. If you can't accept that, we're not willing to discuss it.
Mm.
If you can't accept that, then you need to move on. Simple as
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard because a lot of times you're in those situations, and I'm sure you've had this happen to you where you say that to somebody and you try to make a boundary, but then it gets spun back on you that, well, now you're canceling me because you don't like my ideas. You're casting me out. Like, you're saying that you're inclusive, you're saying that everybody's welcome, but yet I have an opinion and you're casting me out. But I think it's important in those instances to remind yourself and to remind the person that you're not excluding them because of what they believe. You're drawing a boundary because of the way they're treating other people. You can hold your belief, but we can sit down
Mhm.
at the table and act civilly towards one another without shaming and making somebody else feel unsafe who's also at the table.
Mhm. Well, the problem with that, though,
Hmm.
is that beliefs must uh, eventually manifest in behavior.
Sure.
And so my opinion is, if we create, excuse me, if we create safe communities, safe spaces,
Hmm.
relatively, no space is safe. I
Hmm.
mean, we do the best we can
Sure.
to make it as safe as possible.
Hmm.
But um, if the message isn't clear that we are inclusive and everybody's welcome, and you need to accept that value. If that's not clear, then it will just continually keep allowing haters to continue and bullies to continue.
Yeah.
The bullies and the haters need to at some point realize that they can't participate in this beautiful community unless they change their minds.
Yeah.
Now, people are going to start screaming, it's a cult. Sounds like a cult. Everybody has to think the same. No, I'm not. You don't need to think the same.
Right.
We do need to agree on is that there are values to relationship. There are values to healthy relationships and healthy communities and healthy groups. And one of them is you can't judge and hate another person and think that they don't belong, morally or, spiritually or whatever. So I think the pressure needs to be on the bullies and the haters to change their minds, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah, no, it's true. And yeah, it's one of the things I've tried to implement into our community, our Facebook group that we have is
Mhm.
that, everybody's welcome at this table. But like you said, the only people who are not welcome are the people who think that they're right and everybody else is wrong. And just kind of this idea that
Yeah.
we have this place where you're welcome to think what you think, even believe what you believe. But this is a learning place where we can sit down at the table and learn from each other. Like I might not agree with you at all. I might adamantly disagree with your belief, but I can say, I haven't thought about it that way. Can you explain to me why you're so passionate about that idea? But I expect the same in return from you. And so the idea is that there has to be a mutuality there, like a mutual exchange of ideas where there's respect and there's honor for, what the divine or whatever is doing in the life of the other person. That's what we've done on the podcast.
And so what I try to make clear, and I've done this in my groups and
Mhm.
Instagram and so on, is where if somebody comes on and says, but what about the Bible and blah blah blah, and uh, I'm like, look, this is not a discussion board.
Mhm.
This is a community. This isn't a debate room. Like, we're not here to debate.
Mhm.
We are past argument.
That's right.
We are affirming, and we
Sure.
assume that a gay person, a trans person, whomever, is totally, fully human and equal rights, equal privileges, equal everything. And so we don't argue about that anymore. We're beyond that. We're beyond the argument and the debates and everything. If you need to debate this, there are plenty of spaces where you can do that,
Yeah.
where you can argue and debate about whether it's, whatever, to be this or that.
Sure.
But here, this is a new world, a new space where we assume this is our assumption and we're beyond arguing about it. And
Yeah.
so if somebody comes in, "Oh, I just want to discuss it," that is that is immediately very destructive and triggering to so many people because they've
Yeah.
been there. They've been
Yeah.
there. They've heard it
Yeah.
all before,
Yeah.
and they don't want to hear it again and be a
Mhm.
victim to that.
Sure.
Shoot out again. And
Yeah.
so I just keep the space free of that. If you wanted to argue about things, you can go do that somewhere else. But here, this is how our community works.
Yeah. I think too, I think for people, because I mean the LGBTQ issue, I think for me too, like in our group, it's a given that
Mhm.
everybody is
Yes.
that's just, it's, we have like an agree, there's a shared belief, I guess you could say, within the community that like LGBTQ people are welcome, and that's just the way that it is. So I think that topic is probably different than like a topic like the atonement, for instance. Like if you want to talk about like a piece of theology or something like that, where people have varying ideas, I think that's more along the lines of what I'm talking about. Is that somebody comes to the
Oh, yeah.
table and says, well, I believe that Jesus died for our sins because I believe that someone had to take our place on the cross. Okay, I think that's toxic. I don't believe that anymore at all. But I can respect the fact that you do. And then here's what I think. And then we can have a discussion about it without hating each other and throwing things at each other across the table. Like I think it's that
Mhm.
being able to honor where someone has come from in their journey, where they are, where they're headed, things like that. Like everybody's welcome to come to this place, and it's gonna be a place of learning where we're gonna learn where we are in each other's walk with God and the divine, and we're gonna hopefully be able to take something away from our conversation to make ourselves better followers of the divine when we go forward.
And so one of the things that I um in my groups is, so for example,
Hmm.
it's okay to be atheist,
Hmm.
because there's quite a wide diversity of people
Sure.
in my groups.
Yeah.
Anything from pastors and rabbis and priests and imams and church going people and
Mm.
Christians, believers, agnostics, atheists, everything in between.
Sure.
It's okay to be atheist, but you can't be anti-theist,
Mm.
or you can't express your anti-theist views here. And it's
Mm.
the same with, you can be a believer, but you can't be anti-atheist.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference.
Mm.
So I've had this happened a couple of times where I've had um, somebody who might be an atheist, but they're extremely anti-theist. Well, that doesn't work in a group where there's theists.
Right.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So and in my personal opinion, it doesn't help to be anti-theist anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and it's the same when there's believers who are anti-atheists,
Yeah.
and it's like it just doesn't work. So we need to come to that place where we realize we're all on the spectrum somewhere,
Yeah.
the spiritual spectrum,
Yeah.
and that we can be fully embracing of one another. Because I believe one of my core values is that we're all one,
Yeah.
and that these are all just thoughts
Yeah.
that seem to separate us. But that's it. They're
Yeah.
just thoughts.
Yeah.
And but essentially on a fundamental level, we're united, we're one. So I operate from that.
Hmm.
I operate from that assumption that we're one, not that I have to create oneness or unity.
Mm.
I'm already operating from the assumption of unity. And how
Yeah.
do we maintain that?
Yeah.
How do we nurture that
Mm.
in a community setting?
Mm. Then how do you use that community to awaken people to what is already true, right? Like it's not like you're using the community to create
Mhm.
something, like you said, oneness is already there, we're all connected. But how can this community be something that magnifies that reality for people, so that they can see it and they can live it?
How others can see it?
Yeah, like you said, like it's
Well,
not you're not using your community to create oneness. You're operating from the idea that oneness is already there. We're already interconnected. And so what I was saying is then you
yeah.
use your community, I use my community to help people see, to uncover what's already true. Like we're all connected. And if you could just take a seat at the table here and have and meet people who are, like you said, that are different from yourself, who think differently, whatever, and come to this idea, this realization that, yeah, we are all connected. And that's the beauty of the whole thing.
Yeah. So like on Instagram, for example, I think people catch on. It's like in the Lasting Supper when a new member comes in, they you sort of catch on to how this is working.
Mm.
And the reason why this is so, beautiful and wonderful and feel safe is because there are certain values in place and certain boundaries in place
Mhm.
that keep it that way,
Yeah.
and hopefully ensure that it stays that way. So and so people sort of eventually catch on, oh, this is how you do it. Actually, unity isn't achieved by compatibility of ideas, in my opinion. It's through love and mutual respect. That's what unity, that's how unity is formed. It's love.
Yeah.
And it's not compatibility of ideas.
Mhm.
That way, if it was compatibility of ideas, then we would all be on a mission to make everybody think the same way we do.
Mhm.
What and many religions follow that,
Mhm.
is the only way we can be one is by getting everybody on our side and believing the same way we do. But actually, it's love that and light that lights up the unity that we already have.
Yeah.
And so if we can practice that in our groups
Mhm.
where there can be a diversity of beliefs but still a mutual respect and love for one another, that's where the unity is felt.
That's right.
You can actually feel it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the magic sauce.
The magic sauce, love. That's
That's
right.
right. That's right. All right. So here's a question I get asked a lot, and I want to throw this at you. And we talked a little bit about this even before we hit record. But How do you protect your mental well-being, David, in regards to social media? Because I feel like it's a hard thing, a regular person, but even more so for like someone who's creating content like yourself or myself, because I'm sure you have this too, but there's times where like I'll send something out on social media and it's crickets in terms of the negative feedback. You know,
Mm,
everybody likes it, you know, they comment on it, life is great. But then there's other times where I'll send something out and it's like, you know, every 30 seconds it feels like somebody's got something negative to say about it. And I walk away feeling like crap. So I'm wondering what are your best practices, David Hayward, the naked pastor, for kind of
mhm,
protecting your mental health, and what kind of tidbits can you maybe pass along to our listeners in that regard?
mhm. Well, I bet some people out there would probably think that I have failed in protecting my mental health. But um, I I I create stuff that I want to create.
Mhm.
So I'm drawing and painting and writing and speaking from my well,
Yeah.
and so that's my primary motive is I'm just expressing myself. I
Yeah.
get so full of creativity and so on, it has to overflow into either a cartoon or a painting or a post, a caption, or a video or a book. And so that's the primary thing. If I the second thing is I do want to reach people. Of
Mhm.
course, I want to help people. I want to reach out. I want people to hear it or read it or see it. But if I switch those around and my primary concern was pleasing the people,
Mhm.
then I would be in a lot of trouble because I get a lot of negative feedback every day.
Mhm.
So I have to make sure that I'm I'm overflowing with my creativity and putting it out there just because I have to.
Yeah.
And that saves me from constantly being concerned about the response
Mm.
I'm getting. My first concern is getting it out there honestly, transparently, authentically,
Yeah.
honestly, did I say it already?
Yes.
Truthfully.
Mhm.
And so my next concern would be how it's being received. But I can't even let that concern me.
Mm.
So often I'll put it out there and you know, I'm so very busy online that I have a little bit of a team who helps me with comments and all that kind of thing. Sometimes I won't even check comments
Mm.
and I'll only be alerted if there's a problem. But it's so then there's that. There's the
Sure.
actual practical thing of putting things out there.
Mm.
And then another thing I do is boundaries. If you know, the negative comments I used to get or that I get used to really get under my skin,
Mm.
but now they don't so much anymore. And if somebody is just being um, kind of rude,
Mhm.
but not overly, just being rude, that
Mm.
I sometimes I'll let it pass if they're being rude to me.
Mm.
If they're being rude to somebody else, I'll delete the comment
Mm.
or address it. But if they're being mean or bullying, I just delete. I
Mm.
don't even second think about it anymore.
Mm.
I just delete it. And if they come back again and again, I'll block them. I have no hesitation. I don't feel that at all. It's
Mm.
automatic. It's obvious they're not there for the community or whatever. They just want to troll or be hateful or
Mm.
mean. There's some people who just enjoy just being mean to people.
Gonna
I
watch the
don't get
world
it.
burn.
But
Yeah.
there are people. Yeah. And so I just delete them. After a while, they'll realize, huh, I can't be a bully there, you know. Oh
Yeah.
well, move on to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then finally, my personal care, right?
Mhm.
I need to do my breathing, my meditating,
Yeah.
my stretching, my running, my workouts, eat right, you know, all that, yeah, all taking care of myself, writing my journal. So yeah, self-care is very, very important if you're in this business.
Mm.
Otherwise, I've seen a lot of people, maybe you have too, who have started online communities or started blogging or podcasting, and they get so um, wounded and hurt,
Yeah.
and some of them have to quit
Yep.
out of their own mental health
Yeah.
concerns for their mental health and so on, or they're just fed up. They just don't want to play this game.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think taking care of your mental health is very, very important,
Yeah. I
primary
think,
importance if you want to
yeah,
keep doing it for the long.
sure. Something you said earlier
Yeah.
that really struck me. It's something that's been a big kind of realization for me in the last, I would say, year and a half of the podcast is the source from which you create the content that you create. And I think anybody who's a content creator who's listening will understand what you said. I think that will really jive with them. But just this idea that
Mm,
you're not creating content necessarily for the people who are consuming the content. You're creating the content, yes, partially for that, but it's where it's coming from. It's because it's welling up within you, and you need to have this output, this place to put it out into the world. And I think for me, like I've really learned early on, I got a lot more hate for the podcast when we were tackling topics like hell and the Bible and inerrancy and things like that. Like people, especially from my old tribe, would kind of come out of the woodwork who I hadn't talked to in months or years, and all of a sudden they had something to say, and it got really
mhm.
heated and really ugly at times. And there were those moments where I thought, like, I can't do this. Like, I just can't keep putting this content out for people and then taking this hate. But then I came to this realization that wait a minute, this podcast is my journey. Like that's really the reason why I started this, is because I had questions and because I was exploring
Right.
and I had read all these books and I made some contacts and I started to email people and say, "Will you come on and talk to me more about this?" And I made it available to people so that people could kind of listen in and say, "Yeah, me too. I've got that question as well." And let me jump in this
Mhm.
lifeboat, so to speak, and make my way through this question and explore this stuff as well. So it was never meant to be this thing that like I'm doing this to please different people or I'm doing this to cater to these different groups. It was always about my journey and just inviting people along for the ride. And so I think that
Right.
really have to, I think it's important to clarify your motives when it comes to social media, when it comes to the things you're creating, you're putting out there, so that you don't get lost in the mix as people start to chime in with their own opinions and their own thoughts.
You and I are online a lot, and we're content creators,
Hmm.
and you probably are watching, coaches or consultants or people online talking about how to be a good content creator and all this kind of thing. And I see them all the time too. And
Hmm.
some of them are very young,
Yeah,
but they've learned, they all come back to the same basic thing. Just be yourself.
that's
You
right.
got to be authentic. If you're sitting down and you're trying to plan out your content and you're, what are people going to like? What should I give them? What do they want? And you come from that angle, you're going
Yep.
to dry up, and it's going to feel dead, and you're not going to enjoy it. So they're all like, you know what? The answer is just make good content. Just be yourself, be authentic. The more real you are, the more people will like it.
Yep.
And just create your stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the same with my art. Like if I paint a picture and I think I know what kind of painting's really popular, I'm going to try to paint that today because I want to sell a painting, or
Hmm.
or I know what people might like. The life feels dead to me.
Yep.
The painting feels kind of lifeless. But if I just paint because I want to paint, and
Hmm.
I'm not thinking about consumers, and I just put it out there, uh, there's life in it,
Yeah.
and they are more likely to appeal to people,
That's
which
right.
is weird, but that's just the way it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very, very important as content creators that we take care of our own well,
Yeah.
so that there's an abundance there, and it overflows into our content, our creations.
It's really good.
Then you can withstand. You're better to withstand. If you're creating something for the people and they come back at you with hate, that's devastating. But if you're
Yeah.
just creating it, this is my painting, this is my stuff. I did this because I wanted to do it. and people criticize it. It's like, oh, well, okay, you don't like it, but I did it. This is
Exactly.
mine.
It wasn't there to please you anyway.
Oh, that's right. I didn't paint it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had somebody a while back was, I forget what the episode was, but somebody was, like, I didn't like that conversation at all, blah blah blah. I'm like, well, it wasn't necessarily for you anyway. It was for me. Like I came away from the conversation because I needed to ask these questions and I got the answers I was looking for, and now I feel like I have pieces of the puzzle I didn't have before.
Well, it's one of the analogies I use for the lasting supper. I compare it to a potluck.
Hmm.
So in the community interaction in our private Facebook group, there's kind of this little analogy that I use, that when you bring food to a potluck, you just put it on the table, either it's an appetizer or it's a main course or it's dessert, and you just put it where it belongs on the table.
Yeah.
And then when it's time to go eat, you grab a plate and you go along and you take stuff that you like.
Right.
But if you come across something you don't like or you're allergic to, you don't freak out and start yelling and who brought this? How dare
Right.
you bring this? Don't you know this? Or I don't like lasagna or whatever.
Yeah.
You just keep your mouth shut and you load up your plate with stuff you like and you go back to your table. And you don't say nobody's taken any of my dish. Like, why is my dish still there? Or what?
Right.
You don't turn around and say, hey, what's wrong with my dish? Why didn't anybody take any of it? You know?
Yep.
It's the same with community. When people are commenting and posting and all that, if there's something you don't like, just move on.
That's
It's
right.
not for you.
Yeah.
If you do like it, say so. Comment. We listen before we speak. We're just there to support one another and to make to support one another and actually help one another feel good.
Yeah.
So it's like a potluck. If you like it, take it. If you don't like it, move on. And if you post something and people aren't responding, don't take it personal.
Yeah.
Just, you posted it, you did it for yourself, and just move on.
That's right.
And it works. It really does work. And that's
Yeah.
how potlucks work. That's how the lasting supper works.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how your social media works.
That's right. Potluck etiquette.
That's
The
right.
lasting supper etiquette. It is etiquette.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to somebody's home and they offer you a meal, and it's happened to me many times where they serve something that I don't like or whatever. It's like, just etiquette. Just be a nice person. Be
Yeah.
kind.
That's
That's the
right.
bottom line. Be
That's
kind.
right. That's right. That's it.
Mm.
Well, David, we're just about out of time, but as always, thank you for this time with me and with our listeners, and for fielding some of my questions about this
Absolutely.
this big topic. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Yeah. Good to see you.
Yeah, and where can people go? I know you've re-updated your website a little bit. You've tweaked it a little bit since the last time we talked. I think it's been a little while, but I know you did some
Yeah.
updates. But
nakedpastor.com.
yeah,
Yep. Nakedpastor.com is where, my base camp is. And then everything out from there, search Naked Pastor, one word online, and it'll take you to my Instagram and everywhere else.
awesome. Well, I'll throw all your stuff in the show notes, and we'll do this again for round number 6 or 7 next time. Thanks,
Incredible.
thanks,
Yeah.
David.